then I'm going to turn it over to Mr. DeShield with the goals and priorities.
Thank you. Good evening. I want to begin by just going over a little bit of history for the goals and priorities for 2017. We started the process this year. And as part of that process, it began in October of this year with the breakfast meetings with all the chairs to really get a good idea of what are all the priorities for the upcoming year. As a result of that process, over 67 different priorities and initiatives were identified. Those were presented to council, and then we went through a process of ranking those. The process began with council taking an electronic survey of the roughly 65 different priorities, and then a council work session in which we ranked those priorities. And what we're doing this evening is coming back to council with the results of those rankings and the next steps moving forward. In addition, there are a few areas where we need additional clarification that we'll be talking to council about. And unfortunately, your monitors don't work, so you may have to stretch your... This is also, these same charts are here that are in your reports if you look at your reports, but you can also look at the screen. So what we did was, as part of the process, we identified 3 tiers of projects for 2017 from the ranking. Tier 1 initiatives or projects, and those are projects that we believe to be the primary focus for the next year, based on, and where we determined those were the top ranking projects or priorities that were identified through the polling and the ranking. The Tier 2 projects were identified as those are projects that are an important focus for the year, not as important as those that are primary focus, and based on the fact that we have a lot of priorities, as I indicated before, over 67, that we'd be willing to put additional resources if necessary to commit to those resources to make those the possibilities. So the first thing I want to do is just to walk through those priorities that were determined to be in our Tier 1 priorities. One of the things that you'll see, there are a few departments, but one in particular that's going to be very strained during this process, and that's our planning department. We have a number of planning initiatives, quite a few throughout this year, and that's going to be a challenge, and you'll see a little bit later, that's where we're going to have to commit, definitely an area where there'll be a need for committing additional resources for. So as we walk through, we first had the Fair Share Housing Plan. We've been going through that process for affordable housing. Department responsible for that will be the planning department. The master plan re-exam, again, the planning department. Code consolidation. A lot of these projects we've already begun the process. The harmonization of the parking meters in particular, the days and hours, improve the affordable housing application process, and address the maintenance needs for the existing affordable housing process. That's one of the projects that we'll have to, I'm going to suggest we'll have to move on to later in the year, just so we have the transition in the affordable housing office. The next step is the beginning of the planning for the Community Park South, continue our economic development strategies, approve the cold storage facilities, identify public works facilities and make improvements in those facilities, monitor the 206 bridge reconstruction, and improve the website appearance and develop a climate action plan. In addition, I'm going to just walk through some of the other ones to determine ways, and this is one, determine ways to promote green infrastructure. This is one where we're going to have to define what we're talking about in terms of promoting green infrastructure. I noticed some activities within the green team are looking at that, but we would need additional input on that. The next is to complete the bicycle master plan, stormwater management, welcoming American program, updating the emergency management plan, overnight parking, health, incorporating the health considerations into policy making, and again, that's one where we're going to have to talk a little bit more about the details of that. The parking study, the neighborhood character study, the Rutgers review models, and I know that's on its way, so we should be getting a report from the Public Safety Committee on that issue. Planning for the historic component of Mary Moss Park, the Mary Moss Park project, earned sick leave ordinance, and the Butler track. And the Tier 1 projects where those were important, and also any existing projects that we had. Next, we have what was determined to be our Tier 2, which are to hire the masonry expert for the Route 206 bridge, develop a plan for GIS, emergency shelter plan, traffic calming, the second phase of the fire space and equipment study, the 5-year forecast, enhancing that process, developing a strategy for the municipal-owned properties, and developing a town-wide document archiving process, evaluating garbage and organic program, and creating guidelines for adaptive new use. And that's one where we're going to, I know we talked a little bit about, but we're going to have to get some more details. So that's just a run through of where were the top projects that came through, and where the departments that we see are the departments that would be responsible, and any committees. Before I move on to the next section, I want to know if there were any discussions or any areas here that I've identified that we want to move from Tier 1 to Tier 2 or Tier 2 to Tier 1. If not, I'll move on really to the next, and nuts and bolts is really the questions.
Right, so the Tier 2 initiatives are ones that we might not get to?
No, it's just a matter of degrees. Our primary focus will be Tier 1. Tier 2, those are ones that we will get to, and if we need to push additional resources to get to, we'll get to those. But it's just a matter of degrees. 1 is going to be the primary focus. 2 will be kind of the secondary approaches. Those in Tier 3, those are ones that are there. If we get a chance to get to them, we will get to them as time is allowed and resources are available.
So Tier 1 might be ones that we get to at the beginning of the year, and then I'm just trying to figure out the difference. Should I care if there's something on Tier 2 that I think needs to get done this year? And
All
move it to
Tier 1 and Tier 2 are projects that will get done this year.
Okay. So it's more how many resources are going to be
That's
devoted
right.
to them. All right.
Tier 3 are the ones that may not get done this year, depending on time.
So the climate action plan, who's working on, I mean, I know that people on Sustainable Princeton are working on it, and
I can answer
Okay.
that. So there is a really terrific grant opportunity that, sometimes you look at a grant and you try to figure out how we can shape ourselves into the grant. This grant almost seems tailor-made for us, and it's a significant amount of money, and the match is from partners. So it's not even a municipal match. And so Sustainable Princeton is helping to put together the application for that. And it's a significant amount of money. It's 6 figures if we get the full amount. And so it would carry us through not just a plan, but hopefully some of the implementation for the first year.
I've met with a couple people about this, but I didn't realize that there was a grant. Since we had our goal-setting meeting, I guess maybe through the Finance Committee, Mark and I have done a little bit of research about the possibility of hiring a consultant that would possibly help us manage our fleet, our vehicles. But part of that could include, it looks as if you could have them manage your fleet based on any criteria you set forward, including the carbon footprint. So I know that's one of the things that they want to do, is measure what we're consuming now, and so we can get measurable goals going forward. We're at, we haven't even reached out to this consultant. I mean, it's in the very early stages of it. But if there's money available, we might have a match on our hands. So just
Right.
tuck that away as a.
Right, so it's, we want to make sure we do a good job on this grant application, and it's due in July. And so the funding's not going to be here probably till, hopefully, if we're successful, till probably the fall, I would assume.
I don't know whether anybody else is surprised by this, but I look at the 20-odd items in Tier 1 and 13 items in Tier 2, and I see nothing that says anything about a plan or implementation of a plan to manage and preserve our tree canopy in light of the emerald ash borer infestation, particularly the tree canopy on municipal property.
That seems pretty important.
And again, this is based on the ranking. If you look back, if we go back, we'll see. Have to find it on the. You also have copies of the results, so you can go back and actually look where it ranked. And again, this is the process where we talk about whether things should be moved around those ranks. But just based on the voting that we did, it did not rank it as one of the top priorities.
I think it might have gotten dropped because it's the number one, or it's number two, but it's the same as number one. It's, if you look at the first set here, it received 83%.
Let me go back and check the results. Sure. You may be correct. No, you are correct. It got dropped.
Yeah, I think it just got dropped. That was a good catch.
I think we're looking at this in a slightly different form, right, than you have up there. We don't,
It may not be in the same order.
well, we don't have that form, do we? I mean, I
Not
see
the
a
exact
list
same
of things.
document.
I'm sorry?
It's not, you're right. It's not
Okay,
the
it's
same.
not that same.
Oh, no, I just have the list. I don't have the departments and the committees.
Right.
In the report, it just shows you the list.
Can I make a comment about this? I know this is our fifth year at the goals, and we've been sort of moving it along and trying some different things to see if we can come up with methodology that we really like. But I feel like we're back to a laundry list of things that need to get done, and I guess putting it in this form starts to identify who might have responsibility for it, but I think somehow council never really had the conversation. I guess, and the list is already formed, where I feel like we've had our BCC meetings and we've had various conversations with people, but council didn't really sit around and talk about what it is, kind of overarching goals for the community and what we're willing to sort of take responsibility for or lead. And as I was thinking about the goals, and we heard from the Monsignor tonight talking about servant leadership, which we talk a lot about in schools, following up on our finance discussions, I also started talking to department chairs about what it is that would make them feel like they'd had a successful year. And I was able to talk to about 4 or 5 department chairs. Oh yeah, department heads, we call them department chairs in school. But, I think we've got really good professionals, and if we look around at the various departments and look at what we think that they can actually accomplish, we will end up with I think we could end up with a list that is more meaningful than this seems sort of scattershot. Like there aren't, it's hard for me to think about. So I called Bob Huff and I said, Bob Huff, what would make you feel like you'd had a good year if at the end of 2017 we got certain things done? And his list included the cold storage. It included the improvement to the facilities, which I don't know, did that make our list, the improvement to our DPW facilities?
Yes.
Is that on here?
Both of those.
Because it just felt EAB would fall under Bob Huff, and so would the sewer, the stormwater stuff that we've talked about. And to me, then you can also identify which council people are going to liaison and bring that to the council. Some of this stuff is just never going to come before council. And I think when we look at our work, what we should be thinking about is organizing ourselves so that we facilitate the work the departments are doing. If you look at we've got that parking study coming out. We're expecting those results back at the end of August or maybe even early September. We're going to have parking on our agenda at almost every meeting, I think, between the time those come back and the end of the year, because we'll have probably a presentation on the results. We will probably have work sessions. We're going to have a possible ordinance to raise the meter fees. We're going to have ordinances that we're hoping this parking study will capture Maple Street and the parking in the historic Witherspoon Jackson Clay Street. We've also had requests on that, the daytime parking. We're going to have any number of ordinances related to that. And, you know, those take a lot of time and they're controversial. And I feel like in terms of our planning, that's what we need to be doing, is coordinating the things that we need to get done with our own calendar and what we can do to ensure that staff has the support they need to get these things finished.
I think that's well taken. I think maybe when this comes back to us in another form when we vote on it, and I think all of the things you mentioned are on this list. It's more just the formatting, maybe in the timeline.
And again, as we did last year, what we come back to with the resolution is a master sheet that gives you what's up here, which is the departments, the committees, and then a major milestone kind of timeline that gives you just a way to kind of plan out our year. So we will have that at the next meeting.
I second that, because I think one thing we have struggled with, this has been a tremendous process, but we've gotten better every year as we've done it, and I think where we've perhaps fallen down is how we've categorized what is something that staff can do, what is something that council needs to do, what's something that is a joint and needs one product together, or vice versa. I mean, sort of, we need probably more nuance in that kind of thing, but I think it's all here, and we're just getting better at refining, I think, how we think about it. So I like what you have up there.
Is there more
Do we anticipate, as this comes back to us, that we'll define success on
Yes.
something as completed all the way, or substantial progress made, or what
We will
or
identify.
identify key results?
What we'll do is we'll identify under each timeline what the expectation or the outcome that we will be looking for under that timeline for each one of the initiatives.
The other thing I just wanted to jump in, I spoke to Mark about, but would like council's feedback on too, is how to connect the loop back up, especially with our boards and commissions. So, you know, we know there's a lot of energy and talent on our boards and commissions, and we might not have captured work for every single board and commission on this list, and it doesn't mean that we don't care about the work that they're doing, and we still want to keep up that conversation. And so to maybe have a second meeting with those groups that we had back in the fall, to have it in the spring, where we make that connection again, and to have the conversation about what the committees are working on, so we're tied in with that. And to also help, there might be projects. I thought there was a lot of energy around synergistic projects where different groups could be working with one another.
Well, Liz, don't you think we could, at the end of this process, also kind of have our own checklist and say, have we covered that? I mean, we can meet with the groups, but again, that's, you know, that would take a couple of meetings to go through both of those groups. That would be 4 meetings, you know, in the year. That's a lot, in addition to those groups having their regular meetings that we're also meeting with them all together. We could just look at the list and make sure that we've directed those groups as a management effort, like what is it we want them to do?
Right. But I think just the issue is that they're volunteers, so I think it's nice to have the two-way conversation.
Yes. And there's still the tier 3 projects that we don't have on here. If there may be a commission or a board that's under that last year where they can work on that, it's not a major priorities, but it's something that we can, you know, this would be something that council would be interested in. The next thing I wanted to go through are some areas where we need some additional clarification and some discussions about what are the impacts. The first one is to develop the plan for a town-wide document archiving system. And really the clarification we need is what I'd like to do is identify this project, kind of break it down into phases, and really concentrate on the primary phase of this for this year would be identifying those existing documents that are required to be archived for a long term and determine a plan for archiving those digitally. Step 2 would be looking at how do we, in the future, start digitizing our documents moving forward. I think that's going to be a longer process because there's a number of rules in terms of state requirements that we have. But I think for this year, we can start figuring out how do we deal with those documents that we currently have. And phase 2 would be looking at how do we move forward into the future.
Well, but, I think we really have to look carefully at how we're keeping the records right now, because we still too many times we get documents that are scanned, and it's just so wasteful to file a document in a paper file and then scan it back in. And so I don't know if we need some kind of training or education or a system so that everyone learns how to organize documents on their computer and have a file system for retrieving them. Because even if the law requires you to keep a paper copy, we should be using, that shouldn't be the organizing structure for the documents. We should just have a copy that's the archive, that's the paper somewhere, but the document should be easily retrievable. Do you see what I'm saying? Because it seems really like if we start spending a lot of money to scan documents while we're still producing paper documents that we need to scan, that just doesn't make any sense.
I think one of the issues in terms of process, and it's not going to be a simple process as we may think, particularly on some of the documents that are provided in each one of the departments, in producing them in a way that you may think is that will allow us to do it digitally. That will take some time. What I try to do is identify something that I think we can accomplish this year in terms of developing a plan. I think that's a longer term plan, and I don't see us having a result this year on that plan, particularly in some of the departments. There may be some areas we can do it, but for overall, I think there's going to be a lot of areas where we're going to have to spend a lot of time figuring out how do we actually digitize documents.
Well, so just for one thing that I think I'd like to make sure that we're doing is, are we keeping up with digital signing? Because I believe it's been now made, it is now legal. The government has made it so that we can sign digits, we can use digital signatures. So that's no longer a reason, which is often given, that reason's given to me a lot of times. Oh, we had to scan it because it has a signature on it, but we don't need to do that anymore. So are we instituting a method of
We've actually
digital signatures?
We've already started a process of doing digital forms with digital signatures. So we've started that process. We've began that process already.
I also want to second what Ms. Kremler said. I know that the neighborhood, what was that group called? About advisory planning district recommendations that came to us several years ago were to have the planning board applications and zoning board applications available digitally, and it seems like we receive a lot of paper that then we're spending an incredible amount of money on to scan when all of that was created on a computer originally. And so I think we should put on our list that each department that has anything that they're scanning to put together a report this year about what the options are to start receiving that information digitally, because that's the part where there's a disconnect that I still don't understand, why even if we have to require somebody submits written documents, that we can't also require them to submit it electronically, and we save the electronic copy
Actually,
And we
if,
save ourselves hundreds of thousands of dollars.
that's the one
And
thing
we
we
make
can
it
do
easier.
if we'd like to put together a report so that, as I said, it's sometimes a lot more complicated by each department, just explain that to council where there are opportunities, where there are long-term, we can actually do that. If that's,
But
if you'd
I
like
would
to kind of change that goal that way, I think that does make sense.
Okay. Yeah, I would like to see a report on that by the end of this year so that, potentially we can start moving to that, at least in some departments.
And we, by the way, I think legal, like the legal documents could be done that way too. I don't know if your firm is doing that more, because we get scanned legal documents also, so I'm just putting a plug in to say it's nice for any documents to be not scanned.
Yeah, I agree that not everyone is there, but I certainly prefer to have everything in electronic format.
It's really easy to just do save as PDF.
As I said, not everyone is there.
The next issue in terms of clarification is develop a coordinated townwide GIS program. And for this year, I see that process is really just completing a GIS implementation plan for townwide, what we can accomplish for the next year. That will require the cost of a consultant. We have funding already available in our capital plan from 2016 and requested money for 2017 to accomplish that task. The next issue is to begin the planning for the community park south improvements, and I want to define that task as being to complete the geotechnical evaluations and the preliminary planning for that project, and that would require additional resources to an engineering consultant to about $150,000, and that's just to do the geotechnical and some preliminary planning. The next area is the
Mark, can I just interrupt there? This isn't the only thing on there for Community Park South.
it is.
It is. We should also have on there sort of the community master plan. Didn't we feel like we could be able to get started on that, Deanna?
Yeah, I think that's what Mark did indicate, that it's both the geotechnical and the
Oh,
master
okay.
planning.
God,
Yep.
all right, sorry, I got
I
so
called it
busy
preliminary
trying to
planning, I'm
figure out
sorry.
where we were.
The next issue is to complete the neighborhood character study, and that's phase 2, actually putting together in preparation of land use ordinance and implementation. And again, that's going to be one where we're going to have to look at definitely additional resources. We're estimating between $75,000 and $100,000 for a planning consultant. As you saw in phase tier 1, there are a number of major planning projects that we have to do, and the only way we're going to accomplish all of these this year is to really get someone in to do to support the planning office. And we believe this is an area where we can have a consultant do that.
Can I ask something about that too? Is this a continuation? Is this the same consultant we've been using so far? Or are we going to, is this something different? Haven't we already done some of this? Liz, Jenny? I'm
Yes,
looking
we have, and I think we were supposed to be getting
You're going to receive
some
a
clarification,
preliminary
because it
report.
seemed like some of the work that we thought that we paid for, it hasn't been done, so I don't,
What they were required to do is to give you some preliminary documents in terms of the quick fixes, and then give you a framework for a plan moving forward. But actually putting the ordinance together from that point forward is the next step, and that's actually putting the detailed land use ordinances. There's going to have to be community meetings and going before the board, so that it's going to require significant time to do that.
but they
I
still.
agree, but we need to look back at the agreement we had
Right.
with them before we do a second agreement to make sure that all of the provisions of the first agreement were
Yes,
met.
we're
instance,
actually looking at that, and I know Lee is on top of that. It's not necessarily the same. It may be, but it may not necessarily be the same firm.
Well, right, one of the big missing items for me is the neighborhood delineations and characterization study, where the consultants were going to divide up the town by neighborhood and then attribute some characters to them, to each neighborhood, certain characteristics.
I think it's worth going back and reviewing the
I'm not sure if that was,
agreement.
I will give you guys a report on it, but I'm not sure that was
It
part
wa-
of the details, but we'll check. The next issue is, and we spoke about this before, was hiring the masonry expert and contractor. The request for that is $20,000, but I do think we need some clarification on what the role would be for the masonry expert and how they will fit in to make sure that we get the bang for our buck for that process.
Okay, sorry to do this to you. So is the masonry expert different than this is the consultant that HPC wants to hire?
Yes,
That
this is the
20
one where I'm trying to see if somebody else will pay for this.
Right, okay, we talked about that.
The next issue is to identify and make improvements for the Public Works and PSOC facilities. Initially, I don't want to be sticker shock. The initial request for the budget is $1.8 million. That's what was our initial estimate. We're going to have to, we'll go back and we'll fine tune that. That was just their initial estimate. We'll go through the properties to see what is necessary to make the necessary improvements to those properties, and then provide council with those details. The next item we have is incorporating considerations for decision-making, health decision in the decision-making process. And again, part of that is going to be, it's a new kind of concept. It's really getting direction on what
Yeah.
we're looking to do on that.
I would
piece
say
of
that
it.
needs to, I would expect that we would have something from the Board of Health by the end of the year, and there's no council action necessary.
The next item is to approve the design for the cold storage facilities. And one of the things we need to do is determine the most cost-effective design. We currently have two design areas, and one is 1.5 and one is 3.8. And really the key there is determine, based on the useful life for those properties, what's the most appropriate facility to build at that facility. And it's really to find out, they asked that question. Oh, I'm sorry to turn into.
One is really heavy duty and lasts a long time, and the other's lighter and doesn't last as long.
Yeah, it seems to me that we discussed that trade-off at an earlier council meeting, and looked at the trade-off between the life of the two facilities, the cost of construction, and the type of construction to be used. And are you suggesting we need to go back through that once again and
I'm saying we just need directions in
We
terms
didn't-
of staff
we didn't
of
decide.
which way we go.
are you looking for direction from council to say go
Correct.
this way or that way?
Correct.
Right now?
No, not now.
Right.
That's part of the process. And then the final item where we need additional clarification is really creating the designs for the adaptive use and renovation of existing housing and promote age-friendly communities. And I know we had some initial discussion about this area, but this is an area where I really need some help from council in terms of what you're looking for in terms of an objective here to put this together. And I know, Bernie, we had started.
I remember what we talked about during the last goal-setting meeting was a checklist that would be voluntary, that we were going to see if we could put together a group or ask for the Senior Resource Center to help with putting it together. And it would be something that would be available upstairs for people who came in. So when they did construction, they would make the doorways so that they'd be wide enough for wheelchairs, and they could put other accommodations.
And
So
I think we thought likely there is already a list out there.
Right.
Probably, and we just need to identify it.
There are several, Jenny.
Those were the areas where I needed additional clarification. Based on this, and we jumped ahead a little bit, the next steps of the process are, one, to take the Tier 1, Tier 2, identify, go back to both the departments and identify milestones and objectives for those, put timelines associated, responsible parties, present that to council at the next meeting unless there's any additional questions or comments.
I think it'd be useful to maybe have the list in several different formats. So if we could also have the list, a list of all of our boards and commissions,
By
And-
boards and commissions, okay.
Right, by boards and commissions, and which of these, you know, for the Complete Streets Committee, for example, which of these we'd expect the Complete Streets Committee to review and to see if there's boards and commissions without anything, and if there's others that have a long list, just make sure the chair knows that council's hoping that they're going to weigh in.
Well, right. I mean, I also have, for instance, on the Complete Streets Committee, there's a couple projects that aren't on this list that the Complete Streets Committee is doing. So I mean, they don't really require the council to do anything, but I don't know if they need to be on this list.
But that's where I also think looking at things by department is
I-
like
I-
realistically, you know, we've heard that planning is pretty busy, swamped, but you know, we
Agreed.
met with Deanna as part of finance. Did we meet with you as part of finance or parking or one of those things? Her list is also very long too. She's
Yeah.
involved in engineering is involved in almost every single thing that we do.
I know.
And so I think that we need to look at it, and we might need to look at what council members have got on their plate as well. I mean,
So another recommendation then would be to have the list and then have it listed several different ways.
I can do that.
So one by boards and commissions, I think would also be useful to see it by department. And when you do the department ones, if there's a way to break it up with items that are going to need council attention, and then just other major projects that departments might be working on, for example, the health department accreditation and the police department accreditation, that might never come to council, but might be taking up a lot of time, and maybe put those in some, like italics or different font colors, so we know it's not something that's coming to us, but just so we have an awareness of other things that staff is working on. I think that would be helpful for us to see.
but that sort of thing would also probably come to us in the form of a report. So we might want a placeholder on the calendar as we start to think about reasonably what we can do at every one of these meetings. I mean, just looking at this list, you can almost plot it out yourself between the budget meetings and moving on the cold storage, if we're going to do that. You know, the year's almost over.
Well, happy Valentine's Day. And then I should also note that there are likely going to be several major projects that are going to take up a lot of our time that we don't even know about at this point.
So were you finished? I'm sorry. Before we concluded, I wanted to circle back to Earn Sick, which I would note is a Tier 1 initiative. It is something, as I recall, the way we left it last year, the committee that was comprised, so I'm the only one here, actually, Lance and Patrick were on the committee with me, and we submitted a memo to our colleagues stating that we were not recommending action at the time because there were some pending ordinances that had been adopted in other municipalities that we wanted to study more, and we didn't have consensus among us, that subcommittee. And so I would like to keep it as obviously as a priority issue, and would like to continue to work on the issue, and I'm happy to continue serving on that subcommittee. And since Lance is not here, I think we should assign it to him as well, and to continue. He was a good colleague. But in all seriousness, I think we outlined in that memo some work for us to do this year, which is to basically go back and see where there's a difference in the municipal ordinances and how those are playing out and how effective they are, and basically how that's playing out in terms of the workers being served, the businesses being affected. So I would like to keep this as a front burner issue and reconvene that subcommittee to continue to investigate, and would welcome a third person to join Lance and me. I'm sure he would as well.
Heather, I thought also on the agenda was to look at the variety of part-time people. I thought that was an issue with, you know, for lots of different reasons. The part-time people were
Like, what is
sort of a
our
sticking point
workforce
about-
look like? Yeah.
yeah.
We can. I mean, I don't want to promise much on that because we talked to Ralph Widener. There's a real lack of data, so it's anecdotal. We can talk to merchants, and yes, we can definitely talk more about trying to assess what our workforce looks like, and that, you're right, that was on the agenda too. I mean, I'll have to pull up, I don't have the memo in front of me, but basically refresh the analysis in the memo and continue to work on it.
Well, seeing no one raising their hand to join this working group.
Ah, thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Tim.
Oh, there's Mark. It's like, what happened to Mark?
Thank you, Mark, and you ended with a
Thank
whimper. I'm
you.
sorry, thank you.
You know, doesn't this hours of operation, which is in Tier 2, that sunsets this year, correct?
That's why I
Bernie?
was asking the question. And
I recall that Councilwoman Crummiller had an idea on that. I thought that we discussed it at a previous meeting.
right, and I spoke to Trishka about it, and I reached out myself. The ordinance we have now calls for us to put together a working group, and with members of the business community and members of the neighborhood and members of council. I took the liberty of reaching out to the neighbors who said they thought it was working fine, and I reached out to merchants who also said they thought it was fine, basically. And so,
Well, I was on that committee too. Right? Right. No, I was already. So we already did our committee work. We already did it.
okay. So should we have a report about that then in
Yes,
writing?
if you just present something in writing to the
Okay, well,
council.
we'll present
I
it at
do
the next
agree,
meeting.
it has been quiet, so I think it's working, but I think we also need to,
But we need
The
to
ordinance
re-up
does
it, right?
require, the
Yeah.
ordinance that does require that there be a report to the council, so.
Okay, Ms. Crummell and I will
It
have a
does not
report at the next
specify
meeting.
how long or detailed it needs to be.
Okay. Okay, I lost my agenda here. Thank you. All right, so now we come to